that we have talked about in the book of Jeremiah previously. We've finished, I think we've spent enough time in Jeremiah 17. Spent several weeks there. All right, we're going to go to the 9th sermon, which is chapters 18 through 20 of the book of Jeremiah.
Did you skip the end of this chapter?
No, we read it, but if you want to go back to it, we can.
I thought you were going to say something about keeping the Sabbath these days.
We can if you want to.
Might be helpful.
All right. Pastor John wants to talk about keeping the Sabbath. You guys want to talk about keeping the Sabbath? All right, chapter 17. Let's see. Well, let's pick it up. Where does he pick up on? Huh?
Start in verse 21.
Verse 21? Okay. So let's pick it up, chapter 17, pick it up at verse 21. I'll start reading there. Thus says Yahweh, take heed to yourselves and bear no burden on the Sabbath day, nor bring it in by the gates of Jerusalem, nor carry a burden out of your houses on the Sabbath day, nor do any work, but hallow the Sabbath day as I commanded your fathers. But they did not obey, nor incline their ear, but made their neck stiff, that they might not hear nor receive instruction. And it shall be, if you diligently heed me, says Yahweh, to bring no burden through the gates of this city on the Sabbath day, but hallow the Sabbath day, to do no work in it, then they shall enter the gates of this city, kings and princes sitting on the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, they and their princes, accompanied by the men of Judah, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and this city shall remain forever. And they shall come from the cities of Judah, and from the places around Jerusalem, and from the land of Benjamin, and from the lowland, and from the mountains, and from the south, bringing burnt offerings and sacrifices, grain offerings and incense, bringing sacrifices of honor, of praise to the house of the Lord, of Yahweh. But if you will not heed me to hallow the Sabbath day, such as not carrying a burden when entering the gates of the city on the Sabbath day, then I will kindle a fire in its gates, and it shall devour the palaces of Jerusalem, and it shall not be quenched. So, Pastor John, what do you think those verses are saying?
What they are not saying is what I had a coworker who went to a church in town, in this town, who believed that he needed to keep the law.
That we hear that Christians need to keep the law, the Old Testament Jewish Mosaic law.
Which she didn't do because she wore clothes of mixed thread.
Huh?
But she didn't keep it because she wore clothes of mixed thread. But she wouldn't eat pork but also keep the Sabbath, which was on Saturday instead of we celebrate Sunday, and then not do any work on the Sabbath. So she was trying to keep that. So to me, this passage is talking about the law and keeping the Mosaic law. And
Right.
not doing what the Pharisees did, which was build all these fences around it. How do you know if you break the least of these laws? Well, we'll make another law around that so that you don't harm that. And so they would go people who fall away from God to come back and remember God on the Sabbath. But I think, they were under a much stricter law than we are. So. But still, we still have people who won't work on Sunday. That's their Sabbath, and so they won't work. Is that a legalistic thing, a conviction thing? In our era, if it's conviction, then so be it.
Okay, now, Pastor John, you've said a number of things here. You've raised quite a number of issues.
Yeah, answer them. Fix us.
You've raised Pharisees' twisting of the Old Testament Mosaic law. You raised the Mosaic law. Which one of those issues do you want? Which one of those issues
Just
do you want?
keeping the Sabbath.
Huh?
Just keeping the Sabbath.
Keeping the Sabbath, the
That's what this is
Mosaic
about.
law of the Sabbath,
Yeah.
which is what this is talking about,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So Yahweh is saying here what? What is Yahweh describing here? What is Yahweh upset about, and what is Yahweh saying, telling Jeremiah to talk to the children of Israel about here? Is he describing the Pharisaic excesses about keeping the Sabbath day? No, he is not describing the Pharisaic excesses. No.
See, it's as clear as mud to people, right?
Huh?
It's as clear as mud to people. I don't think most of us.
Well, somebody just describe what he's talking about here.
Well, he's talking about doing things. Jerusalem seems to be a central part of this command.
And what's his focus on here in this section? What part of keeping the Sabbath is he focusing on? Come on, you guys.
Bring no burden through the gates of the city.
Right. You're not, one of the things that would be an obvious breaking of the Sabbath would be riding into the city with a huge burden, a huge weight on your horses and your animals on the Sabbath day. That would be a breaking of the Sabbath.
But it also says, nor carry a burden out of your house. So the Pharisees had to define what a burden was. If you were going to carry a burden out of your house, nor do any work. Well, what is work? What is a work?
But the Sabbath was supposed to be a day of rest.
Right. So it's pretty clear what he's saying here, that they weren't supposed to be doing that, right? What they weren't supposed to be doing on the Sabbath. But of special interest was the gates of the city, right? Where commerce is where, the gates were where commerce was conducted, right? So that was of special concern. Apparently, they were just doing commerce on the Sabbath day quite readily, apparently. And they weren't observing the Sabbath day rules of the Mosaic law at all. They were just carrying on regular commerce pretty much as normal. Just like we do here and now, right? On Sabbath day. We don't keep Sabbath. We don't observe Sabbath day stuff. We don't think there's any significance to it because we don't keep Sabbath. And they weren't doing it either, right?
But, you know, most of the, and maybe all of the Ten Commandments, except keeping the Sabbath, are repeated in the New Testament. So we have no New Testament instruction to keep the Sabbath. And so it seems like it's gone away from the importance of us keeping the Sabbath.
So why did you want to talk about this one?
I'm not sure that it's clear in people's minds, at least the people I talk to, about Sabbath and keeping the Sabbath and not working on Sundays.
Okay.
You know, it's not clear in people's minds why
We
should
don't
be free
keep
from
Sabbath?
that. Why we should be free from that and not.
Why committing adultery is still a problem, but keeping Sabbath isn't?
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you tell us?
So Pastor John, is it in the New Testament that we are to worship on Sundays and not keep holy the Sabbath?
Well, the New Testament started meeting, New Testament people started meeting on Sundays early in the book of Acts, so.
But why on Sunday?
Because that was the day that
resurrection?
the Lord was raised from the dead.
Okay.
That became an important day. So Sunday became the important day for Christians early, since that's the day he rose from the dead.
But obviously, they stopped keeping Sabbath.
And they no longer.
They no longer kept Sabbath.
And nobody ever says, Paul doesn't say it, Peter doesn't say it, John doesn't say it, you need to keep the Sabbath. You know, which started Friday evening, so.
Well, actually, Jesus did say something about the Sabbath.
Well, he owns the Sabbath, yeah.
Huh?
He owns the Sabbath, I mean, the Sabbath.
He also said the Sabbath was,
made for man and not man for Sabbath.
right, which means what?
That we should be keeping the Sabbath?
Huh?
Does it mean that we should be keeping the Sabbath?
No, just the opposite, really.
Okay, I'm not following.
So can we take this back just a little bit?
You want to take it back?
Yeah, I think we need to go back a little bit on this, because we're way forward on the discussion on the Sabbath. Well, I would like to go all the way back to when God instituted the Sabbath, which was when he stopped his creation effort. And his institution of the Sabbath, if you want to call it that, actually started before the Mosaic Law. But the Jews or the Israelites were commanded to keep the Sabbath. Most of us are not Israelites, so we were never instructed to keep the Sabbath, which I believe is why it's not repeated in the New Testament to believers, because believers include more than just Israel. But
Now, I suspect most everybody did not understand what you just said.
okay, what should I read?
Because I'm confused about what you just said.
Okay.
I mean, I think I know what you're trying to say, but I don't think you said it very well.
Okay,
But the
what
Ten
should I
Commandments
say?
are for all of us, right?
No, they're not. They actually aren't. However,
Oh,
So,
Well, were they-
what are you saying?
what I'm saying is we
I think your point is well taken, but I don't think,
we as believers have never been commanded to observe.
what do you mean, we as believers have
in
never been?
Jesus Christ, as New Testament believers, we've never been commanded to observe ritualistically or otherwise the Sabbath. It's never been something that we've been instructed to do. And as to the question of the Ten Commandments, again, we have to stay true to the text. Who were the Ten Commandments delivered to?
The Jews.
the
The
Jews.
Jews.
Yeah?
Were they delivered to the Gentiles?
No.
No. Okay, so the Ten Commandments were a part of the Mosaic Law. That
So it's
doesn't-
okay for you to commit adultery and
doesn't
murder?
mean
I was gonna
that we
say, are
can
we
commit
covered?
adultery and
Huh?
murder. That doesn't mean that we can commit adultery and murder and do all those other things,
Oh, it doesn't.
There's still a
because,
sin.
huh?
There's still a sin.
There's still sin, and those things are repeated in the New Testament for believers.
Okay.
But we have to be careful that we keep the Bible in context and recognize when God said what to who, and then determine, does this apply specifically to me? You have to, and that's the confusing thing in today's Christianity. We want to take everything that's written in the Bible, promises and everything else, and acquire them as our own when it may or may not be appropriate. So the Sabbath, very clearly, was never given as an instruction to the New Testament church. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't recognize that God did put some significance on it, and he wanted the Jews, the Israelites, I keep saying Jews, that's a modern day term, but the whole nation of Israel, he wanted them to observe the Sabbath day, to recognize that it was holy, set apart, and it's directly related to God ceasing his activity during creation. So it's actually an act of worship. So we don't willy-nilly violate the Sabbath, but we aren't commanded to keep it. Does that make, was that any clearer?
Yeah, that was better.
Okay.
That was much better.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that because of the new covenant, God doesn't even command the Jews of this age to keep the Sabbath? It's not, you know what I mean? But he probably will in the millennial kingdom again.
I couldn't understand what he said. What did
You gotta say it louder.
Say it louder.
what did he say?
He is saying that, he's saying we could extrapolate that God's not commanding the modern day Jew to keep the Sabbath either, but during the millennial kingdom, he likely will, and to that I don't have an intelligent answer.
Didn't the new covenant get rid of the Sabbath ruled for the Jewish people in this dispensation or this age?
Speak up, son, I can't hear you.
Didn't the new covenant in Jesus' blood, you know, God always deals with mankind and the Jews in different dispensations. So in this age, the Sabbath isn't a rule that the Jews have to keep. If you're a Messianic Jew, you don't have to keep the Sabbath. It's not a sin for a Messianic Jew not to keep the Sabbath.
Right.
Right, right.
See, the thing too, the confusion there is a lot of people believe that a Messianic Jew means you take Judaism and you combine it with Christianity, and that makes you a Messianic Jew, and that's not the case at all. What makes you a Messianic Jew is that you happen to be Jewish, and you become a believer, and Jesus is now your Messiah. You are not, that you don't keep practicing Judaism and then Christianity when you become a Messianic Jew.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right, right.
I've got a dumb question, and I should know this, but I don't, but, I mean, is the Sabbath every 7 days?
Was the Sabbath ever the seventh day?
Every 7 days, is that
Yeah.
the Sabbath?
Every 7 days.
Okay, I mean, you know,
The seventh day of the week was the Sabbath.
I mean,
If Jesus said that he made the Sabbath for man,
not man for the Sabbath.
right, to me that means it's a day where, we should rest, not only
Yes.
physically,
Huh?
not only physically, but it's a day to really spend with Jews, to be worshiping, soaking in the Spirit, you know.
Well, he didn't specify that.
No, that's,
It's for rest.
okay,
It's for rest.
okay.
Don't forget that God rested on the seventh day.
Yahweh himself rested on the seventh day.
Yeah, but he didn't rest as in he was tired.
Yeah.
He rested in that he ceased his activity. That's an important distinction, I think.
Well, you're saying that, but that isn't what the text says.
That's part of the gloss of the word Sabbath in Hebrew, cease from activity.
That's right. But
Rest is-
you're making that distinction. The text doesn't make that distinction. So
But what we know about,
you can't
but
make
what
that
we know
distinction.
about God,
Huh?
but what we know about God dictates that he doesn't get tired.
Yeah, but you're making the distinction without having any right to make that distinction.
So do we have a right to say that he was tired?
No, and I'm not making that
Okay.
statement, but you're making that distinction as a way of trying to indicate that he was tired,
I didn't
and
say
he
he
was,
was
or that he wasn't tired, and you don't have that right. Because that wasn't the point.
I have
The
every
point
right.
is that he just ceased from his activity.
I have every right. Well, from what we know about God and what we know about tired, there's no connection.
Okay, fine, but that's not the point.
I got a question.
Well, wait a minute, it actually is the point, because Sabbath is not just about resting because we're tired. It isn't. If you look at Sabbath in the Old Testament.
Okay, Dick, what's your
it's
question?
ceasing- It's
My question is
ceasing
that-
activity.
When God created the world, did he create it for all of us or just the Jews?
Huh?
When God created the world, did he create it for all of us or just the Jews?
Well,
Right, that's
I mean,
my-
obviously, the Jews weren't the Jews at the
I
time
know,
God
but
created.
that's my point.
Yeah,
It's for all of us.
right.
It's
There
sometimes.
weren't any Jews yet at
I
the
know,
time.
but at the point is that we can get so picky that we leave things out and we include things,
Yeah, that is actually a good point.
you know?
Yeah.
So I guess I take the Bible as it's meant for everybody.
Yeah,
And then we need to decide, or he tells us, who and when. But to nitpick on some of this stuff is not necessary because the Lord reveals to us what he wants to reveal to us in truth. And I understand teaching and things, but we can get to the point of nitpicking to the point where we aren't solving anything.
well, I'm having trouble understanding.
I'm just saying, we can get to the point of nitpicking when we aren't solving anything, we're just splitting stones or hairs,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Yeah.
So what are you saying, how does that relate to the Sabbath day? Should we,
Well, that's not my point. The point wasn't my Sabbath at all, you must have missed it.
yeah, I did miss it.
Yeah.
Well, I think this contributes to the confusion, because I think it contributes to the confusion, because we never really define that God, what means when it says God Sabbath, Sabaoth, or however you say it, you know, so if we don't define it, then how are we gonna understand it?
Wasn't his command in the New Testament to not forsake the gathering?
Huh?
His commandment for us in the New Testament is not to forsake gathering together. In churches, we're in homes, you know, but if he made a day for rest, he made a day for rest. I mean, you know, that's my point is we can go down this rabbit trail for a long time and not get anywhere.
I have one last thing to say. Hebrews chapter 4 does talk about the Sabbath rest, and so that's the New Testament light shining on the concept of Sabbath, the Sabbath.
Well, it's,
So,
my point is that you cease the other activities of life and you focus on other things.
Yep.
It isn't an issue of whether you're tired or not.
right.
The issue is you change your focus and you focus on Yahweh, you focus on Him and worship, and you focus on giving Him the kind of attention that He deserves rather than the making of living and all of the activities of life that are not as directly focused on Him and giving Him the attention that He deserves.
That's the
That
point
was my point.
That's the point that I was trying to make and did a terrible job at.
So we were making the same point.
We were.
We were. Well, sorry I missed your point, Mark.
That's all right. It's my fault.
But you know, we have walked so far away from Sabbath or a Sunday rest. I mean, as a kid, I missed the days of one gas station being open, and I missed the days of one gas station being open, one pharmacy being open, and a mom and pop grocery store in case you needed to get that jug of milk. And now it's gone.
I agree.
And
I agree.
so now it's a matter of, you catch up on the weekend what you didn't get done during the week because you worked during the week, and that whole day of rest, whether it's on Sabbath or on a Sunday or whatever, it's
Yeah.
poof.
Life was so different
It
when,
was.
when life was marked by that kind of structure, wasn't it?
Well, and I'm not, we went to church, but my dad loved to fish. So we always went fishing or we went visiting family on Sunday. But there wasn't any work, but it was, and I'm not saying our focus was on God necessarily, but it was with family.
Yeah. But wouldn't it have been wonderful if the focus had been
Oh,
on worshiping
totally.
and learning about Yahweh?
But I think the mentality was, is you go to church, you do your hour of time for the crime,
Yeah,
and then you go about your business. And forgive me for saying it that way, but that's basically, there's a reason why on Saturdays, the 4 o'clock mass of the Catholic Church is called the Sinner's Mass.
yeah, yeah,
There's a reason for that.
yeah.
You did your hour, now you can go do, whatever. And so I have to tell you, the very first time I spent time with my former sister-in-law, who was Seventh-day Adventist, and we were gonna go on a hike on the Sabbath. And we're driving through this town, and I'm a tourist, and it's like, what do you think I wanna do? I wanna go shopping. And no, we just kept on going. But I have to tell you, the Sabbath at their house was so peaceful and renewing and rejuvenating. It was a little hard to deal with, but it was like, this is really nice. There was nothing, no distractions, nothing to, our focus was on rest and maybe reading something devotional or whatever, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did any of you grow up in a home where Sunday was a sacred day and it really was a focus on spiritual things?
No.
We went to church every Sunday morning, but it
Yeah,
wasn't.
no, I'm not saying, I'm not saying go to church.
That's what I'm getting at. People would say that's it, but that's not it.
Yeah,
No, we weren't there.
But I think people weren't also taught, perhaps what that, other than, you don't work. You don't work. But I don't think my parents were taught or ever given an inkling that it should be a spiritual day.
No, nobody. I never ever.
Nate, did you grow up in a home where Sunday was a,
Well, actually, let's be honest, the Jews, when they keep the Sabbath, they don't keep the whole day in worship God. I went to church Sunday till noon, and then I went back to church in the evening, so I felt that was a pretty good bulk of the day.
morning and night we went to church? Those poor guys, they had to sit in church Sunday morning and Sunday night. Oh, man. Oofta.
But we did, we went to church all morning, Sunday school on church. And then at our dinner table,
Speak up, Anita.
at our dinner table, we had spiritual, religious discussions all the time
On Sunday?
on Sunday at our noon meal. And the rest of the day, maybe not so much, but good for you.
What kind of church family were you? Were you Roman Catholic?
No, Lutheran,
Lutheran?
yeah.
I guess in our house, we went to church.
Speak up, Larry. Don't.
In our house, yes, Sunday was the day to go to church and rest. We had devotions every morning, but
Every morning?
every morning, at the breakfast table, we had family devotions. But on Sunday, my father, it was chores only. There was no field, no harvesting, no nothing. He just strictly chores, and that was it on Sunday.
Interesting.
there's a saying that goes, work on Sunday, for farmers, okay?
Yep.
Work on Sunday, break down Monday.
All right, Pastor, did that cover what you wanted to cover?
What other can of worms you want to open?
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, I thought that was an interesting can of worms. I thought that was interesting.
Well, interesting, yes.
I mean, we still struggle with what Christians should be doing on Sunday, but then I don't struggle so much with it because in our era, you're a Christian every day. You don't save it all up for one particular day. So
I work with two guys that are Seventh Day, and I work with Kimber, Flemmer, and Travis are Seventh Day, so they keep the Sabbath, and they don't eat pork.
Yeah.
So it is, I mean, they're obviously, I mean, it's not a sin for them to do that, but I'm like, what, you know what I mean? When we talk with them, but at the same time, they're misinterpreting and applying scripture incorrectly to them.
Yeah.
When you get old like me, you practice Sabbath every day.
That's good.
So will the Antichrist, do you think, abolish like the Sabbath and worship on Sunday? And set up a different day for people to bow down to him?
So what?
So when the Antichrist comes, do you think he will abolish the Sabbath as a day of worship for those who keep the Sabbath, or
I don't
Sunday?
know. I don't know what he'll do, but
Because I had somebody that's Seventh-day Adventist that said
yeah,
that's what he will do.
you know, yeah, I'm sure that all worship will be of him and his image, yeah.
Oh, that I know, but I meant the day, because this person said, oh,
I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea.
I'll let you talk.
Wow.
When Larry said it was chores only, that's all they would do. I always think, what's the difference between chores and field work? You know, work is work.
No, but chores you had to do.
I know,
You had to do chores. There was no choice on chores.
Right, but even the Jews didn't do that. They did nothing.
No, they did chores.
They did chores
They
too.
did do.
Oh, they did do chores.
Remember Jesus said to the Pharisees,
Yeah.
which one of you would have a lamb that falls into a pit? You
Yeah,
would
they
be
did
interested in
chores.
taking it.
Yeah, they did chores.
If they would have young camels or, whatever, I mean, they would have done that. Probably.
I understand, it's fine, we never worked Sundays. I did after I took the farm over 5 times, 5 Sundays on the farm. I always went to church that morning. Now, that's not making it better, okay, but I fellowshiped in the morning. I went still in worship. Then I went to work. Only 5 times in my entire career. And I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, I'm just telling you, this is what I did. We tried to keep it, we just didn't work. And I had, what Carlene said, work on Sunday, break down Monday. I had so many farmers come to me and say, I can't understand, you never work on Sundays, and you always get your work done before I get mine done. We work 7 days a week, and they said, maybe you should just do what I'm doing, There's a little bearing to that.
I think so.
I'm not trying to be legalistic when I say it, but there is a little bearing to that,
So there's definitely something to that.
I've been having an interesting little discussion with Curtis, but his point is that it's impossible to keep the Sabbath these days. Well, it was impossible to keep the Sabbath in the Old Testament, and that is because all of the law was given to prove that no one could keep the law.
Yeah.
So the law turned out to be just another way to sin and another reason you need Christ.
So why do they add law upon law upon law? I guess,
Well, that was their philosophy, that if this is the law, you might step outside of it. So let's make it a little bit tougher, so if you step outside of that, you're still contained within this. And they kept putting fences around the law, making it harder and harder to keep the law.
Oh, my
So they really didn't want,
They-
basically, they wanted people to sin?
No, they were trying to bully them into keeping, if they.
More, keeping the law more.
Keeping the law more.
Yeah.
I
So,
see
you
rebellion.
know, if you had this fence way out here and you happen to step inside it, well, that can be forgiven because the real law is way down here. So you step in there, just pushing back out. So if you go through a field and you pick up a grain of wheat and eat it, well, that's harvesting. It's against the law. So they went to ridiculous ends.
Mark, closing prayer.
Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this church and for the privilege of studying the Word together. I do pray, Father, that everything that we do and say would glorify you, would be in an effort to understand your Word and to walk according to it. And Father, I just pray that you would help us the rest of the day to focus on worshiping you. I pray that you would receive our corporate worship. In the precious and matchless name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen.